We've got special coverage here on SNY and on our social platforms. Gary Apple sitting alongside our SNY MLB insider. It's Andy Martino as the Mets are getting set to introduce new owner and CEO Steve Cohen and new team president Sandy Alderson, who returns to the organization after departing back in 2018. Also going to be joined over the course of our coverage here by both Todd, Zeile and Steve Gelbs in just a little bit. And so, Andy, we've heard so much about Steve Cohen over the last months, but today, great anticipation as to what he's going to say, as indeed he is going to make his first statements on television as the owner of the New York Mets. So what are you expecting?
Well, Gary, I'm expecting Steve Cohen to say he's excited. I expect that feeling's authentic. He gets to own a sports team, a team that he's rooted for his entire life by his account. I expect him to talk about building a sustainable winner, why he believes that Sandy Alderson was the right person to put in charge in order to do that. But I also want to make the point, Gary, that I don't know entirely what to expect, and I don't think our viewers out here do either, because one interesting aspect of Steve Cohen is that as much of a discussed figure he is in finance, in the art world, in sports now, he's really not somebody who's spoken a whole lot in public over the course of his career. Even if you look online, there's only so many clips you can find of Steve Cohen's speaking voice. He's somebody who's been operating behind the scenes. I don't know that he's had to face questions from the press, from a New York baseball press that could be aggressive when appropriate. So there are aspects of a new environment for him too, and I'm interested to see how he handles it. There are a lot of questions that are specific about the direction of the team that we all want to hear from. I'm interested to hear how Steve Cohen comports himself in an environment like this. So, well, I think we can expect some standard fare about excitement and winning. I'm also just interested to hear his voice in a setting like this. Frankly, he hasn't been all that present in public himself over the years.
Right. We know the fan base is really excited about today because there is a perception out there that, and Steve Cohen is going to be the richest owner in Major League Baseball, that the purse strings are now going to be opened and moves are coming, and they're going to come quickly. Are you pulling back on the reins on that a little bit? What's your mindset along those lines?
Well, I believe he's going to spend aggressively, but I also believe he's going to spend in a way that he and Alderson consider smart. They're going to invest on the back end of the organization. They're going to beef up analytics, international scouting, all the kinds of things. You know, when we say East Coast Dodgers, and that's a phrase that's attached itself to Cohen's vision of the Mets over the past couple of weeks and months, what we mean is a team that has a tremendous amount of infrastructure. The Dodgers have people devoted to research and development, and it's not just free agent signings. It's not just who is the pitcher that we can sign, and I think we're going to hear from Steve Cohen right now.
All right, let's take you now to today's introductory news conference. Steve Cohen, Sandy Alderson, we take you there right now.
And CEO Steve Cohen for some opening remarks.
Good afternoon. I went to my first Mets game with my dad at the old Polo Grounds. Years later, my friends and I used to sit in the upper deck at Shea Stadium. That makes today a dream come true, not just for me, but for my wife, Alex, and my whole family. Alex's dad, Ralph, makes it to just about every home game. They're all rabid Met fans. I have a lot of people to thank today. Let me start with Fred Wilpon. We've been watching games together for many years, and he's one of the true gentlemen in baseball. Thank you, Fred, for bringing me in as a minority owner back in 2011. And thank you for your support as we transition the ownership of the team. I also want to thank Commissioner Manfred and my fellow owners for their guidance and support. And finally, I want to thank my fellow Met fans, the greatest fans in baseball. Your support has been incredible. You want us to win the World Series, and so do I. New York fans have high expectations, and I want to exceed them. I want an exceptional team. I want a team that's built to be great every year. I don't just want to get into the playoffs. I want to win a championship. Now, owning a team is a civic responsibility. You hold the team in trust for the community and for the fans. That's how I see my role as the owner of the Mets. And that's why Alex and I plan to invest in communities around Citi Field. Alex is going to lead the Mets Foundation. She's done a great job leading our family foundation. She gets involved and really knows the organizations and the communities we support. and I know she'll do the same here. Some of you may have noticed I've been tweeting with the fans. Our fans matter a lot to me. We may not always agree, but I will listen to what they have to say. I want Mets fans to have a great experience with us. You may ask what kind of owner I'm going to be. I'm going to be an owner who builds a team that has continued success. We want to create a blueprint for winning. We will hire great baseball people like Sandy Alderson. Sandy and I share the same philosophy. We want to make find great players and make them better. We are starting with our homegrown talent and building from there. When we need to fill a gap, we will fill it. It might be with a free agent, or it might be through a trade. We're going to strengthen our farm system, keep our players healthy, and use the best analytics. We're going to build a process that produces great teams year in and year out. You build champions, you don't buy them. And we have a great core on this team. And we're going to get better. And I plan to make the investments we need to succeed. We want to win now, but we're also building for the long term. In my investing business, I get judged every day. I know you will judge me every day too. I'm all in. Let's go Mets.
Thank you very much, Steve. To ask a question, please click on the Participants tab, followed by the Raise Your Hand icon at the bottom of your screen. Prior to your question, please restate your name and affiliation for our audiences at home. If you prefer to ask your question in Spanish, we do have our translator, Alan Suriel, here on the call to facilitate. Team President Sandy Alderson, of course, is also here to answer your questions. But we'd like to begin this portion of the conference with all your questions you have for Steve Cohen. That way, once completed, Steve will be able to exit the call and Sandy will remain to answer all your remaining questions for him. So with that, our first question is to you, Steve Gelbs.
Hey, Steve. Steve Gelbs from SNY. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you, Steve.
One of the reasons that Mets fans are so excited about this is that they feel like the team was purchased by one of them. And you started talking about this a little bit. You're a lifelong, passionate Mets fan. What is your earliest and greatest Mets memory? And what was it that originally made you fall in love with this franchise?
Well, like I said, I went to the Polo Grounds with my dad, I think 1963. And, I used to go with my buddies. We used to take the train from Great Neck, take it to the Shea Stadium stop, and, sit in the upper deck. And we had a phenomenal time. And, that's when you develop your affiliations with teams, So I was 13 when they won their first World Series. And so, I'm a baseball fan. My family's, great Mets fans, great baseball fans. And so, it's going to be a family effort here, and we're all very excited.
Steve, you spoke about your vision for this franchise moving forward. Why was Sandy Alderson the right man to execute that vision right off the bat in your mind?
Well, first, he knows the Mets organization. I mean, obviously, a lot of the same people that he brought up as players are, now obviously doing great things, with the Mets. Plus, he's a total professional, and he's had a lot of experiences in baseball, and I've got a lot to learn, and I can't think of a better person to learn from.
Thanks.
Your next question is from Anthony DiComo.
Hi, Mr. Cohen. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You kind of run the gamut in terms of how involved they are in all aspects of the organization. How involved do you plan to be in various aspects, particularly in baseball operations?
Well, I played Little League once, but that's about it, right? So I'm going to let the professionals, Sandy, and, the people we bring in, let them run baseball. I'm sure they'll make recommendations to me, and, it'll be a collaborative effort. But ultimately, they're the experts. And generally, but, I hold people accountable, just like I do in my business at Point 72. And, I ask probing questions, and I expect reasonable answers, and it'll be a two-way conversation, but ultimately they're the experts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your next question is from Disha Thozar.
Hey, Steve, congratulations.
Thank you.
Just two-parter here. What's the current job status of Luis Rojas?
I'm going to throw that over to Sandy, if you don't mind.
Sure. So if he's
Guess not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Sandy will be unmuted momentarily.
Okay.
I can tap dance if you want.
I think I'm unmuted. Thanks, Disha, for that question. So I have talked to Louis a couple of times since Friday, and most recently yesterday. We talked about his situation. We talked about his coaching staff. What I told Louis was that it's very likely he will be managing the Mets in 2011. But I left the door slightly ajar out of sort of respect for the process we're going through now to find a president of baseball operations. I don't want to foreclose that person from having some input, but I did have those conversations with Louis, and as I said, my expectation is that he will be managing the Mets in 2011.
Thanks, Sandy. And then just one more for Steve, if I can. Just what was that moment like when the Wilpons announced in February that your original agreement to purchase the Mets had collapsed? And did that kind of just intensify your desire to eventually become the owner?
Well, listen, I put a lot of time in trying to figure out if this was the right thing for me to do, and my whole team at my family office did a ton of work. So it was disappointing, because I really wanted to make it happen, and but so be it. It was a complicated transaction, and sometimes when things get complicated, they fall apart. And that's what happened then. And but here we are. We're sitting here today and managed to work it out. And I'm really excited.
Thank you, Steve. A reminder, if everybody, just for our audiences at home, if you could restate your name and include your affiliation. With that, the next question for Steve will be from Mike Puma.
Mike Puma from the New York Post. Steve, as you mentioned, you've been a minority partner for several years. I'm just wondering, is there any point you became frustrated with the manner the Wilpons were running the team?
Well, listen, I'm not going to comment on, they own the team, they can do what they want. And I was a minority owner, so I sort of equate a minority owner to being like a season ticket holder. Okay. You don't really have a lot to say. So, so that was that. But here we are today, and now I am the owner. And so I get to, be in charge myself.
And for years, the complaint's been the team doesn't spend enough money. It seems the team's in a position now to spend a lot more money if it wants to. I mean, where could you see the payroll going conceivably?
Well, I'm not going to talk about a budget today. Sandy and I have been in conversations on that. But what I do believe is this is a major market team, and it should have a budget commensurate with that.
Thank you.
Next question is from Tim Healy.
Hi, Steve. I'm Tim Healy from Newsday. Yeah, I was just curious, owning the Mets, having the Mets, do you see that as more of a business like Point72 or a hobby like collecting art?
Well, the amount of work that's going to be required here is, more than a hobby. But, I don't consider it like Point72. I consider it something that I'm essentially doing it for the fans. When I really thought about this, I can make millions of people happy. And what an incredible opportunity that is. And so, that's how I'm thinking about this. I'm not trying to make money here. Okay. Like I have my business at Point72, and I make money over there. So here it's really about, building something great, building something for the fans, winning. And, I just find this an amazing opportunity, and I'm so excited for it.
Thank you.
Your next question is from Justin Toscano.
Justin Toscano from The Record. Congratulations, Steve.
Thank you.
Being a fan, had followed the team. So throughout the last decade, what did you feel was missing from this franchise being able to reach that top tier? And how do you, with your resources, plan to provide that to fill those gaps?
Well, listen, I'm not going to speak about, the Mets previous to my ownership, but what I am going to say is that, we're going to build a professional organization. We're going to build out our processes, and whether it's analytics, whether it's scouting, whether it's development of players. We want to be excellent in all areas of this game. That's going to require resources, and I'm fully committed to making that happen. I'm not in this to be mediocre. That's just not my thing. I want something great. And I know the fans want something great. And so that's my goal, and that's what I'm going to do.
And on Twitter, you mentioned taking those suggestions, and you actually replied to quite a few of them. Were there two or three that maybe particularly interested you as things you would like to institute maybe as early as next year?
Well, I depending on whether we have fans or not, having an old timers day would be kind of fun. I don't know why we wouldn't do that. It appears like the Tom Seaver statue will be ready to be unveiled, so we should have festivities around that. But there were so many great ideas, and we put them all. We've archived them, and you can just tell the fans are really, really knowledgeable. They know what they're talking about, and they're the customer. So I've got to listen, and I want to listen.
Your next question is from Bruce Beck.
Steve, congratulations.
Thanks, Bruce.
How do you balance trying to win now and making a splash with trying to establish sustained success over the years?
Well, first, I think we have a really good core of players already. And so I think we're starting with a pretty good base. We've got to work on parallel tracks here. We've got to build up our baseball management team. We've got to install processes and ways of doing things that sustain excellence over a long period of time. But we want to win today, which means we're going to have to make sharp baseball decisions on who to bring in and who to go after, that's Sandy's department, like I've said, and they're going to be the experts, and they're going to make recommendations. But I'm not in this for a short-term fix. Okay, I'm really thinking about this of trying to build a sustainable franchise. Okay, I don't want to be good 1 year and bad 3 years. Okay, I want to be good every year, and that's the goal. So that's the type of business and team I want to build.
Otis, the next question is for you. If you'll introduce yourself.
Otis Livingston from CBS 2. Congratulations, Steve, on the purchase of the New York Mets. You spoke really emotionally about being a fan growing up and being at different ballparks and watching them play. How do you separate in your decision-making being a fan and also being a businessman? Because some owners can be emotional and go out and make changes, that they feel are necessary.
I can only tell you the way I run my business at Point 72, and I'm very measured, and very calm and try to be very thoughtful about things. I think impulsive decisions tend not to work, and so I want to make sure there are checks and balances within the organization so that I want my people to feel like they can feel comfortable and tell me, hey, if I feel this way and they feel differently, I want them to tell me, and that's how good decision making is made. I may have a thought, they can shoot it down if they want. Like I said, I'm the new guy at the table here. All right, so I got a lot to learn, and so that's why I need to surround myself with real professionals. And I'm a pretty quick study, so over time I'll get better, and I'm not worried about that. Saying that, I've got a day job too, so I've got to make sure that that the team is operating at full power, even when I'm doing my day job. So, and I anticipate building that.
And also, as a fan, how much is it burning inside of you to not only bring one World Series to Queens, but multiple World Series titles?
Well, the way I look at that is you win one, you got to win one first. All right. So you got to get started. And then, but, I have a feeling that's a good feeling and you want more of that. So I suspect that's what, I'm going to be shooting for. And, and that's what makes it fun. Right. I mean, you want to win. No one remembers you came in second and third place.
Next question is from Bradford Davis.
Hi, Steve. Bradford Davis, the New York Daily News. Nice to meet you and congratulations. So I do know, a number of City Fuel workers were excited about the financial support that you had, reportedly committed to them, as many of them aren't working the normal shifts at the park. Do you have a timeline for providing that support? Maybe that might be a question for your wife, if she's running the foundation, but I did want to ask that.
So I didn't really fully understand the question. So.
I apologize. To restate, I know that a number of City Fuel workers were excited about the financial support that you reportedly committed to them while they're not working the usual shifts at the park, the consequences of the pandemic and everything. And I was curious if you had a timeline for providing that financial support to, out of work City Fuel employees.
Well, I mean, I think we committed to doing that. I own the team, so that should start fairly soon. Listen, we're committed to support our communities. My wife is so good at this. I mean, and you're going to love her, and she's all in too. So, it's an important part of, being involved with the baseball team. The communities care about it. We care about the communities. And, we're going to investigate, find out things that are worth backing and providing support for. And we look forward to that.
Thank you. And just to follow on just, community involvement, obviously this was a crazy year between the pandemic, but also the many protests that even baseballs, became a part of with the Black Lives Matter movement and everything. And I'm curious how you see the Mets organization under your leadership, being a part of this broader sort of conversation and activism on social justice.
Well, listen, I mean, I think these are important questions that, America is discussing. Black lives do matter. I feel it's really important that we have a diverse group of employees, not just for the sake of diversity, but for the sake of diversity of thought. People come from different backgrounds. And I think it makes for a much more richer environment to have people from, different walks of life. If my players want to express themselves, they're entitled to do it. It's freedom of speech. The only thing I ask for is, if they're going to do it, just make sure when you're between the lines, you give 100%.
Next question comes from Ron Blum. Ron, we're going to come back to you. The next question will be from Mike Vaccaro.
Hi, Steve. Mike Vaccaro from the New York Post. Congratulations.
Hey,
Mike. Two questions, disparate questions about your background as a Mets fan. One, can you name one or two players or one or two moments of your younger days as a Mets fan that really stick with you all these years later? And two, in your conversation with fellow Mets fans on Twitter, I mean, do you get a real sense that they kind of look at you as being what they could be if not for, deeper pockets and different circumstances?
Well, The first question, Cleon Jones making the catch in left field to win the World Series. And I think I mentioned, Tom Seaver, the Jimmy Qualls, breaking up the perfect game in the ninth inning. Those stick out as two great moments. And then even one more, the obvious one, Mookie hitting the ball through Buckner's legs, which was an extraordinary, moment in baseball. So lots of good memories. And so what was the second question?
Well, when you've had these conversations with Mets fans on Twitter, obviously they're a pretty excited and excitable bunch. Do you get the sense that they kind of view you as being their proxy almost? They would be you if not for different circumstances and deeper pockets.
Listen, I grew up in Long Island. I don't have a big ego. I'm doing it for them. I'm a low key guy, and I relate to them. I know how I feel like I know how they feel, and these are smart fans. They know what they're talking about. And if they're emotional, that means they care. I'd rather have emotional fans that are passionate than fans that don't care. And so, I think it's phenomenal. And I think it's, I love talking to them. And I didn't know I would love talking to them. I did it and I started enjoying it. And so I'm going to keep doing it. And, there'll be times when, things aren't going so well. And I'm still going to do it.
Next question comes from Mark Carrig.
Hi, Steve. You're just talking about being a Met fan. You talk to a lot of them, and there's always that resent about the Yankees kind of being the bigger team, getting all the free agents. How do you see that balance now that you're the owner of the Mets? Do you see yourself trying to compete with them for those types of players, beating them for those types of players, and reshaping the identity of the franchise in a way?
I'm not competing against the Yankees, okay? This is the Mets. We're going to create our own excitement. I'm competing against, 29 other clubs in MLB. All right. So, it comes down to, us making good decisions, taking advantage of opportunities that arise, which we're going to do. And, I'm a very motivated, very proactive type of guy. I just don't sit back and just accept mediocrity. And so that's, listen, you got to set goals. You got to set goals for the team. You got to set goals for the fans. We should set high goals. We shouldn't accept, just making it to the playoffs. That's not good enough. And so that means we're going to have to go out and get great players, develop great players, provide them with the resources that they're going to need. In all parts of the organization. That's what we're going to do.
When setting goals, how many seasons will you be pleased with in? Like when the Mets win the World Series, is it going to be 1 year, 2, 3? What is your standard for that?
Well, only one team wins the World Series every year, right? So that's a pretty high bar. Mm-hmm. But if I don't win a World Series in the next 3 to 5 years, I'd like to make it sooner. Then obviously, I would consider that slightly disappointing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Representing, of course, The Athletic. The next question is from Justin Walters.
Hi, Steve. Justin Walters, Pix 11 News. I know you touched on it a little bit earlier, but could you take us back to February and when the sale didn't go through? Was there any trepidation that you weren't going to become the owner? What was your thought process then?
Like I said, it was a complicated deal. And not only that, but I was already starting to think about COVID too, and wondering if there was actually, how that might affect the deal too. So I'm not even sure it would have gone through in the end. And so it didn't happen. Sometimes deals fall through. It's not a fault to anybody. Just that's the way it goes. And all you can do is give it a shot. And, like I said in my statement, I gave him my best shot. And lucky enough, I had the opportunity to come back and get involved. And here I am.
And one more, you mentioned about wanting to be a winner. You do a timeline of hopefully winning a championship in 3 to 5 years. How should your tenure as an owner be judged? Should it be simply if you guys win a championship, getting into the playoffs? And do you think fans will hold your feet to the fire if those expectations aren't met?
Well, if they're not met, then they should hold my feet to the fire. Listen, in the end, I'm not hitting the baseball, okay? All I'm doing is providing the resources to my management team, and ultimately I got to be held accountable for that. And so it's not easy winning a World Series, but like I said before, you got to set high goals.
Next question is from Tyler Kepner.
Yeah, hi, Steve. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tyler Kepner with the New York Times. I want to ask you, what are some principles that you can take from your success in the business world and investing that you can apply to baseball, whether it's analytics or just something that has made you successful in one field, how that translate to baseball?
Well, actually, the irony, there's a lot of similarities between my hedge fund and a baseball team. I mean, I hire young people, and I have an academy. The Mets have an academy in the Dominican Republic. We take great pride in developing our people at Point 72. They come up through the organization. That's exactly what's going to happen, as players come through the farm system. I provide them lots of resources so they can do their job as effectively as possible. That's what I expect to do with the Mets. Sometimes we go out and hire people from other firms. Similar to the Mets, they'll go out and sign free agents. So there's a lot of similarities, and it's really about talent and developing talent and putting the best people out there that you can do on the field and in the organization too.
Is there anything that you'd like to see in terms of analytics or bringing the Mets up to speed with other trends around the game? Is there any emphasis there?
Well, I mean, that's part of the one of the areas that we want to upgrade. I use data and analytics in my business at Point 72, and and the Mets do that today. So we want to build on that and provide all the resources and the amount of people you need to have a quality analytics department. These are all little edges that you can get by having analytics, and I don't want to give them away to somebody else.
Next question comes from Dave Lennon.
Hi, Steve. Congratulations.
Thank you.
This is Dave Lennon from Newsday. I know you gave kind of a vague answer to the expenditures you might have or investing in the team payroll, and you said you're going to spend like a big market franchise. There's big market franchises, and then there's big market franchises. Do you see like that luxury tax threshold as a suggestion when it's around $200 million? And, do you see yourself as more of the upper echelon of the Dodgers and Yankees type of spending teams?
Well, listen, we're trying to formulate those thoughts today. I mean, I can promise you we're going to act, like I said, like a major market team. Are we going to act like drunken sailors, in the marketplace? No. Okay. So, listen, I want to be thoughtful. You can spend a lot of money today and then tie up your team in bad contracts for the next 5 years. Okay. Which, so that's part of building sustainable franchise. You want to make decisions, not what works for the next, 60 games, but works for the next few years. And so, we want to be thoughtful about it. I think we're in an unusual market today, given COVID, where a lot of teams and we're starting to see players, maybe being offloaded because of financial concerns. And I think Sandy and I want to take advantage of that. So I think there'll be lots of opportunities. I think teams are going to want to talk to us, and we'll see what's available.
Thank you.
Next up is Maggie Gray.
Hi, congratulations. This is Maggie Gray from WFAN. And you're buying a team that has 3 fourth-place finishes in the NL East in the last 4 years, hasn't made the playoffs since 2016. How close do you think this team is? And I have a follow-up.
Well, I think you can maybe ask Sandy that, he would have a better sense. My sense is that we have holes to fill. And, clearly we need to, fill a catching and we need to, we need more pitching. We have a pretty good core of core offensive players. I think that, so we have good young players. We have the best pitcher in baseball. I think that helps a lot. So we have a lot to build around. And so, but we came in fourth 3 years in a row. So, the results speak for themselves.
My follow-up question is, it seemed like a pretty spirited competition between yourself and the other bidders for the Mets.
Yeah. Who were the other bidders? I don't remember.
Maybe someone you might have heard of, Alex Rodriguez, Jennifer Lopez, minor figures really, but just kidding. Have you heard from A-Rod or Jennifer Lopez since this has all resolved itself and you have now owned the team?
I haven't, and, but I certainly wish them well.
Next up is Ed Coleman.
Hey, Steve. Ed Coleman from WFAN, WCBS. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You mentioned using analytics in successful businesses and your hedge funds and that. And we kind of had a come to Jesus moment in the World Series this year with Blake Snell and the role of analytics. How do you view analytics in the game today? How do you view the role in the game of baseball?
Listen, analytics is really important, but even in my hedge fund, we combine analytics with the human component. And so I'm not going to second guess, what the Rays did. I mean, they got to the World Series. It was a heck of a team, an amazingly put together team. And so, they stuck to their game plan. And that's how they operated all year. In fact, I would argue, maybe to make that, I think it would have been hard to deviate from the game plan that got them into the World Series. So, that's what they did. And, listen, every decision is not 100%. You got to, even with the best information, the best analytics, sometimes things happen. That's just the way it is.
Thank you. Next question comes from Jeff Passan.
Hey, Steve. Jeff Passan from ESPN. Congratulations.
Thank you, Jeff.
When you're looking at what you would like this franchise to be like, is there a model out there in baseball or maybe in another sport that you say, hey, this team does things really well?
Well, I think I like what the Dodgers are doing. Okay. I mean, they have a really strong farm system. They take advantage of opportunities in the marketplace for free agents and trades. I think they run a pretty good business operation too. So, I think that's one team that, easily, seems to make the mark in the type of places that I want to do the same. So, I'm sure there are others, but we also want to do it our way. We want to develop our processes, sort of the Mets way with a Mets culture, which is going to be uniquely ours. But listen, I'll take a good idea from anybody, and if someone's doing it better than us, I'm going to try to figure out why.
And in that vein, Steve, when you're looking for a new president of baseball operations, what are you seeking in that role? Is it someone analytically inclined? Is it somebody with a scouting background? Is there an archetype that you believe would be best for that job?
You would want somebody well-rounded, right? That would have skills in all those different areas. I'm not crazy about people learning on my dime. And so, hopefully we can find someone that feels sort of, is well-rounded and, has abilities in multi areas.
Thank you. Joel Sherman, your mic is live.
Steve, Joel Sherman from the New York Post. Was there any moment where you had concerns that you would get the necessary ownership votes to get control of the Mets? And what kind of stuff did you have to do between agreement and finalization with the other owners to make them comfortable that you were the right man for this job?
I felt like I was going to get approval. I do know some of the owners already, and so and they know me, so I thought that was pretty helpful. So I wasn't really worried about it. You know, I felt pretty good about it.
Does it bother you at all that, I mean, not every vote could be for premier of North Korea, but you weren't unanimous here. Does that bother you at all that you came in with some people at least having doubt if you were the right person to be the steward of this team?
Listen, I can't speak to what they were thinking, and all I know is I did get 26 votes, and you need 23 to be an owner, so I accomplished my goal.
Next question comes from Tim Britton.
Hi, Steve. This is Tim Britton with The Athletic. Congratulations.
Thank you, Tim.
This isn't your first attempt at buying a Major League Baseball franchise. I was wondering, in the time since you attempted to buy the Dodgers about a decade ago, how much have you thought about what kind of team, what kind of organization you want to build over that time?
Yeah, I mean, I came in second with the Dodgers, which means nothing. And, it's not easy to find a team that you actually, I didn't want to travel to certain cities. So I actually felt there may be I may never get another opportunity to own a team that I would want to own. And lucky enough, the Mets, came up for sale. So now I get the opportunity to put my imprint on a team. And I'm a stickler for detail. I'm a stickler for a strong process. I don't suffer, people who give me responses that are mediocre. I see through that fairly quickly. I'm not a micromanager. I really, I'll hold my people accountable, but I give them a lot of rope to run. I have a day job, right? So I've got 2 jobs now. And so, but I feel like we're going to build a management team around me that I can, I can collaborate with and give them the rope to run. I'm not going to sit there and second guess every decision. It's not my style.
And you mentioned building a Mets way and a Mets culture. What, if you could describe that in brief, basically, what do you want the Mets culture to be?
Well, I want professionalism. I want integrity. I'm not going to put up with maybe the type of stuff that's happened in other places. And I want to hire the best and brightest. And I want to create a great farm system, develop our players, and provide an environment. And also let's not forget the fans. Provide a product, and when they interact with me at the stadium or on our media platforms, wherever, that their experience is extraordinary.
Thank you. Next up is Kevin Kernan. Kevin, unmute.
Congratulations. And I'm just curious, you talk so much about building through the minor leagues, which I love to hear, and the opportunity you have now to get scouts. But as a Mets fan, not as the owner, what was your reaction when they traded Jared Kelenic, and what that did for the future?
Listen, I'm not going to question what happened in the past. They made their decision. I'm sure it was well informed. Generally, our belief is we want to hold on to our farm system, and only use them when we're, close to, if we need to use them as chips to trade for a player, that we do it when we're close to really winning a championship. I feel really, in my own hedge fund, the key to my firm is that we develop talent all the time. If I didn't do that and depended on just going out in the world and getting hiring people from on the outside, I'd be out of business. Okay, so I really feel it's important that we draft well and develop our players and hold on to them.
Ron Blum, we're coming back to you.
Hey, Steve, when you look at your background and your business experiences, what are the different attributes you've picked up along the way that you think translate well to running a baseball team?
I think you got to be patient. You got to create, decision-making processes in the business that, are sustainable decision-making, so that you're planning, you're providing, like I said before, resources so that people can do their jobs and do it well. And that's what I do at my hedge fund. I provide every resource I can think of so my analysts and PMs can perform to the top of their ability. And that's what we're going to do with the Mets. We're not going to just spend money wildly, but, we want to have great coaches. We want to have great technology. We want to have great analytics. We want to have great people making decisions. We want a collaborative culture. Okay. We don't want it being run in an autocratic way. Best ideas come out of the organization. Okay. Like some of the best ideas in point 72 came from someone within the organization who had an idea. And so, like I said, I'll take a great idea from anybody.
I think we have time one more for Steve before we get to Sandy. Rich Catino, your line is open. Rich, please unmute.
I think Rich left. He gave up.
All right. We are going to then move on to Bob Clappish. We will wrap up Mr. Cohen with you. Bob, your line is open.
Hi, Steve. It's Bob Clappish from Star Ledger and NJ.com. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, going back to your days as a rabid Met fan growing up, what was your opinion of the Yankees? If you don't want to comment on them now as an owner, but as a fan, did you admire them from afar or were they brand X?
So the Yankees have a great history, right? I mean, they've won 27 championships, 28. So, that's pretty impressive. And so, that's what happens when you build a great organization, and they had that. Saying that, there were times when the Mets were great too.
Right.
And so, we just want to, be great more often. And so that's what I'm focused on. And I'm ready for the challenge, I'm all in here.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Steve, thank you very much for your time today. Very much appreciated. And with that, we will now turn over our attention to questions for Sandy Alderson. Please, again, remember to use the raise your hand icon. And we will begin with the first question from Steve Gelbs.
Hey, Sandy. For you, what was the key ultimate factor that made you decide that you wanted to come back to the Mets and take on this new challenge?
I think it was Steve Cohen. I mean, you've just heard him over the last few minutes, and I think that that's what excited me, was the opportunity to come back and work with a guy like Steve, whose vision parallels my own. I sent him a memo a few months ago, actually, to talk about that. I think we're very well aligned in terms of philosophy and strategy and potential execution. But ultimately, it was about Steve. I mean, look, I love the opportunity to be able to come back to the Mets. There are a lot of people there that I know, I respect, I love even. And I'm excited about meeting new people because I'm always excited about new ideas. But first and foremost, it was Steve. And so I'm excited about the partnership and really looking forward to what happens over the next few months. The last time I won a World Series was 31 years ago. So that 3 to 5 year time frame, it's a little concerning, but we'll live with it.
Well, Sandy, when this deal became official, you were pretty swift in your decision-making, parting ways with many members of the front office during these past couple of years. Why did you feel that was the necessary first step, and how do you now plan on structuring a new front office?
Well, in my experience, I think that anytime there's a change of ownership or a change of leadership at or near the top, there are going to be changes made in the levels of leadership. And partly it's not because people aren't capable. It's not because people aren't competent. I have a great deal of respect for Brody and for Allard, and obviously Omar. But in terms of how we envision the team being structured, its decision-making processes, as Steve pointed out, all of those have to be aligned with the personalities. So it's not just competency, it's also about how people interact. And so, in addition to that, we're going to have a new head of baseball operations. It's not going to be me. And sometimes it's better to make these decisions in advance to give a new person a chance to make their own choices and not have to come in and their first act is to terminate some people. So, and I felt it was important from a timing standpoint. I felt it was important just for alignment of the leadership of the organization. And so we ended up doing it on Friday.
Thanks.
Next up, Tim Healy, your mic is live.
Hi, Sandy. Tim Healy.
Hey, Tim.
Hi. Front office search-wise, what is the state of that, and what do you expect timeline-wise, given that it's already mid-November?
So two things happened on Saturday. We had a new president-elect, and I interviewed my first candidate for president of baseball operations. So we're already we're already on our way. We're already involved in the process, and that was one interview. There will be others. We're currently evaluating exactly how many and who we will pursue, but this shouldn't take a long time. Wouldn't want to put a time limit on it, but we understand that it's important to get people in place. In the meantime, I've got a small but very capable group remaining. We talk every morning for an hour or so. I have already been in touch with agents for free agents. I've talked to some of our own players currently, and I've also reached out to Luis Rojas. So there's a lot going on, most of it behind the scenes, but I don't think we're behind at all. And particularly this year with, I think, what will be a slower developing free agent market, together with a sort of a additional market that will develop at the tender date and through the trading period. So it's going to be exciting. There are a lot of different options. I think Steve pointed out we want to be active in all of those areas, and I think we have the resources to do that.
And you mentioned sending a memo to Steve a few months ago to, I think, talk about the Mets.
Yeah.
When did that happen, and were you looking to come back?
Well, this memo happened well after we'd had our first conversations. And so I thought in order for Steve to be comfortable with me, that he needed to hear some of my thoughts. And so, I put together something that I thought would encapsulate my thinking and hope that it would align with his. And ultimately, I think it did. But what's important to me is not having a job, but having an opportunity to create something really special. And I think with Steve, and you've just heard him, I think with his, not just his intellect, but his thought processes and enthusiasm, together with what I think is the appropriate way to approach all of this from a philosophical, a strategic, and a sort of an execution standpoint, I'm really excited. And with that memo, I think we understand each other pretty well. And as I said, I'm really excited, and I think that we're on the right page and we're heading in the right direction.
Ed Coleman, we're going to come to you next.
Hey, Sandy, welcome back. Congratulations. Good to see you. You mentioned the head of baseball operations that you're looking at now. Can you go through a couple of things here? Can you go through like the pecking order? Is there a general manager under the head of baseball operations? And what is the input from people as far as that and the manager as well?
So first of all, Ed, good to see you again. If I put on my reading glasses, it'd be like looking in a mirror, okay?
Many people have said that, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's true, because I recognize those glasses. They're from Walgreens, right?
Yeah. No, CVS. But what?
Okay, all right. So we both shop at the drugstore. So with respect to the president of baseball operations, I think that what we're looking for is the most accomplished baseball person we can find. And from there, the rest of the structure will flow. So it's very possible that we'll have a general manager beneath that person. But I think that, we're going to allow that person to have some input into how the structure ultimately is created. So, I've got some ideas, but they're more general. We want a very collaborative organization. I'm not going to make the baseball decisions. I expect to have a seat at the table, but I don't expect to be, seated at the head of the table. So we're going to have a process. It's going to be collaborative. This person is going to have a lot of runway, and we're going to build the organization around him. Now, I think we've got some very capable people in-house, and so it's not as if we need to start from scratch. But once we get that person in, then I think we'll figure out exact roles for existing personnel as well as some others that we may bring in. But, I'm very excited about that. As far as, the manager is concerned, with the caveat that this new baseball leader will have some input into the managerial decision. I've told Louis that he's very likely our manager in 2011. And so
21.
21, I'm sorry. So from that standpoint, Louis and I have had conversations. We've talked about the coaching staff, and of course, I know Louis from my years with the Mets before. He's a very capable and fine individual, and I like him a lot.
Thank you. Next up, Joel Sherman, your line is open.
Sandy, I know Steve Cohen tried to dance of trying not to compare previous administration to this one, but you literally worked for one and now you work for the other. And I wonder what you think is different for you now that this is something you want to do.
Well, first of all, let me say that but for the opportunity that the Wilpons and Saul Katz gave me back in 2010, I wouldn't have had this opportunity. So, what I hope is to be able to build on the experience I had before. There's no question that their ownership styles will differ. There's no question that there will be differences in the way we operate, the differences in our emphasis and overall sheer capacity to do things. But what brought me back, as I said before, was Steve. I think there are immense possibilities in connection with this team. I have I don't go back to the Polo Grounds in my relationship with the Mets. Probably my most memorable moment is Wilmer Flores hitting the ball out on a Friday night. So I'm a latecomer to the game as it relates to the Mets, but I'm no less invested, not only in terms of my professional commitment, but also emotionally. So I'm excited. I told the employees earlier today, this is an optimistic moment. I mean, for a lot of reasons. We have new ownership. The background is Maybe we found, a COVID vaccine. We got the election behind us. It's the Marine Corps birthday. It's a great day. And I can't tell you how excited I am to be part of what's going to happen going forward.
Sandy, can I follow with one other thing?
Sure.
What do you believe is the core value of the team as a contender right now? Like, where do you place it? And therefore, how do you handle this offseason to augment it if, for example, you think it's the core of a high-end contender?
Well, I think that, we have some real strengths. I think from an offensive standpoint, there are definitely some first division championship pieces. Jacob deGrom is by definition an ace. He's the definition of Cy Young, if you will. There are things that we do well. There's things that we don't do well. We need to shore up some positions. Our pitching staff is thin. Our depth at AA and AAA is thinner. The bullpen has been inconsistent. We have needs behind the plate. Our team defense is, and honestly, I'll take some responsibility for even the team defense as it exists today, from the emphasis that we put on offense years ago. So there are a lot of things that we need to do, but I think there is a foundation there, and I think if we can add the right pieces this year, and Steve has indicated that we'll have the opportunity to do that, we can be pretty good pretty quickly. And that's my goal for 2021.
Next up is Dave Lennon.
Hey, Sandy, welcome back.
Thanks, Dave.
I'm curious, you've known a lot of owners in multiple sports probably too. Have you ever seen quite the dynamic that Steve has as far as a lifelong fan, with the type of resources that he has and his knowledge for trying to put together a team? He seems to be kind of in a unique category.
No, I would agree with that. I think that, his history, his passion for the team that goes far beyond just this ownership bid, his resources, but also I think his success at .72 and the way in which he sees similarities with the team. I've always said, for a long time, there are more similarities between baseball and other businesses than there are dissimilarities. There are some things that are different. There's a different vocabulary. There's a different set of, there's a different calendar. There are differences, but not that many. And I think what you see over the last 10 or 15 years is teams like Boston, teams like Tampa Bay, teams like the Dodgers, recognizing those similarities and adapting them to the baseball industry. And that's what we want to do. And I think that, we have the opportunity now, not only to, adopt things from, the broader baseball community and for business generally, but from what's been really successful for Steve. And I think he articulated some of the things that are transferable, and that it's not so much, it's not people, it's not hardware, it's ideas. It's an approach and an emphasis on how you run the business, how you make decisions, and how you achieve the professionalism across the board that I think is part of what we want to create with the Mets, as part of their reputation. We want to be, we don't want to just be known for winning. We want to be known for how we win. And I think that's the difference between, a great franchise and also a sustainably successful franchise, and one that, is hit and miss. The Mets are they're a storied franchise, if you will. Some of the stories have been good, some of them have been bad. if we want to be an iconic franchise, which I think we are capable of doing, we have to write more good stories than bad, and occasionally we have to write a really epic story. And that's what excites me about these next few months and years, because I think we have the chance to do that.
Tyler Kepner, your line is open.
Thanks. Yeah, welcome back, Sandy. Good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you.
You may have gotten around to some of it in that answer, but the very first thing you said is that your vision, Steve's vision, parallels my own, I think is what you said. How so?
Well, I'm going to read something from the memo that I wrote for Steve. I don't know, several months ago. First page, second paragraph. I'm afraid to put on my CVS glasses, but I'm going to try to read this. A vision for new ownership: to create an iconic Major League franchise respected for its success, competitive and financial success, and how it achieves that success, and for its commitment to fans and community. So, okay, it's a vision statement. You start to unpack that. And as I said before, we want to be iconic. The Mets have a chance to do that. I'm not sure you can be iconic in most parts of the United States, regardless of, it's hard to do in a place that's not New York or Chicago or LA. It's been done, but we have that opportunity in part because we're well located. But in order to get there, we've got to be sustainably excellent. That's the way we get there. The Yankees in 27 or 28 or how many championships they have, they're iconic. We're not using them as a benchmark, but I think there are examples for what we want to achieve, around the country in various sports. The thing that's really important to me as well, though, is being respected for how we get there. And so on page 2 of this little memo, it was about that piece of it. And, we want to be, I hate to use some of these cliche words, but, we want to be authentic. You're going to hear from me and, you're going to hear from Steve. You just saw Steve. I think he came across as pretty authentic. We're going to be out front. We're going to communicate. We want to be professional. We want to be collaborative. We want to be innovative. Those are all kind of cliche. The real question is, how do you execute on that? It's easy to say it. We all say we want to build a good farm system. Well, how are you going to do that? I mean, the real proof is in how you actually go about doing it. And so we're going to have the resources. So first of all, you have to have capacity. You got to have enough people. You got to have the technology. You have to have the ability to run the analytics. You have to have a big enough scouting staff. On the business side, you have to have enough people selling tickets. You have to have enough people who are able to man all the social platforms, et cetera, et cetera. We want to be a fully built out professional organization. And in the meantime, treating our employees in a way that they have pride, not only because they happen to be affiliated with the Mets, but because they have pride in the way that the Mets function and ultimately, their performance. So, with employees, so I get on with all you guys and it's on TV and all that sort of thing. We all make impressions on fans. Steve does, I do. But actually every single person who works at the Mets makes impressions. And the Mets reputation is a sum of all those impressions. And, I get an opportunity to make more impressions just because it's in the media, but every one of us has a chance to make impressions. And so, I hope I empower our employees across the board, baseball and business, to make those impressions and feel good about the fact that they represent the Mets. And not just because they're fortunate enough to be working in sports, but because they feel they're really fortunate enough to work for the Mets.
How much did it hurt you that, the Mets have acquired, maybe earned this reputation for making some, I don't know how you'd put it, but some questionable decisions or crazy things that happen, and LOL Mets, all that stuff. You know all about it. Like, how much did that hurt the pride of working for the Mets and what the organization is supposed to stand for?
Well, when I first joined the Mets in 2010, I remember walking by bus stops in Manhattan, and there were somebody had built an advertising campaign around the sort of ineptitude of the New York Mets. That didn't feel good. And we went about trying to change that perception. And for a period of time, I think maybe we were successful, but we can't do it just periodically. You don't change perception without some sort of consistently successful message. And that message comes from all the things that we do. It's not just making a trade, that turns out well or turns out poorly. It's all the other little things. It's the phone calls to fans. It's a sum of all of those impressions. So you don't change the perception without changing the reality. You're not going to. They're not often the same, but you're not going to have a positive perception for long if the underlying facts don't support it. So we have to do a lot of things well, and I think Steve is going to go a long way toward changing that narrative. I really do. It's going to give us some leeway. With the Mets often, or anything, I used to say this about the umpires. If an umpire makes a mistake, there are two different reactions that can result. The average fan will say, they all stink. They all make mistakes. They're terrible. They stink. But if you've created an environment where somebody can respond and say, you know what, these guys are great, but everybody makes a mistake once in a while. And so it's really about changing the underlying perception so that when things happen, they're not interpreted, consistently negatively or in some other fashion that doesn't put the team in best light. So, I'll stop talking, but I think that, we got to change the perception, but I think, Steve's going to give us a real chance to do that.
Next up is Mark Carrig.
Hey, Sandy, Mark Carrig from The Athletic. Just wondering, in the last year and a half, being away from day-to-day operation of the team, I guess, did that time give you a chance to sort of reflect on these philosophies that you're talking about? And if so, I'm just curious, has anything changed in your worldview of how to run a baseball team? Just having that opportunity to have that kind of away from the day-to-day.
That's a good question. First of all, I don't think my view of how to run a successful baseball team has changed. I think what this will do is give me an opportunity to perhaps implement some of those ideas. When I was with Oakland the last couple of years, I wasn't directly involved in trade conversations. I mean, occasionally, but they got a great baseball operation there. They didn't need me to, help them with their trade possibilities. What I really enjoyed, though, was talking with minor league staff in particular and major league staff, coaches and Bob Melvin, about the game, and not only about the game, but about some of these ideas. I remember talking to the whole minor league staff one day about the importance of a coach having some curiosity. One of the problems we have in the game today is that, we have the analytic group and we have the scouting group, if you will, the traditional scouting group. And sometimes they talk a different language, but sometimes they don't even talk to each other. One side might be resentful. The other side might be not disrespectful, but unwilling to sort of admit the value, and we end up with at loggerheads. And to me, what curiosity means is that you're willing to grow in yourself, but also you're curious about people around you. It's not empathy as much as it is, having real respect for what other people do and an interest in finding out how they do it. And I think that's what we're going to try to foster with the Mets, not just in baseball, but in business as well. We want people who are curious about others, because when you're curious about somebody else, there's a certain level of respect that goes along with it, and a willingness to be open-minded. And I think, what we need is some of that open-mindedness, because that's the real key of how to blend the analytics and the human side. You're not going to get there without kind of a mutual respect for both parties.
Anthony DiComo, your line is open.
Hey, Sandy, I have two quickly. One, just what assurances perhaps did you receive from Steve Cohen that you will have freedom, sort of quote unquote carte blanche, to do things the way you want to do it, and how might that contrast with your previous tenure here?
Look, I'm an employee, okay? I've always felt my job, wherever I was, and certainly, my last tenure with the Mets, my job was not to make all of the final decisions. My job was to make a lot of the decisions, but in certain cases, make recommendations. I mean, there are seminal events that take place, whether it's a $100 million contract or something of that sort. That's not a decision I'm going to make exclusively. That's something that I'm going to discuss with Steve. My job is to make recommendations, and ultimately, if I'm successful, he'll accept my recommendations more often than he won't. But I'm comfortable with the relationship that I've established with Steve already. We talk, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a day. When he's eating a sandwich, when the market slows down at noon, he calls me up and asks me some question that, I don't know what he's going to ask me, but usually they're insightful questions. And, hopefully I have a response. But I think, intellectually, variety of way, professionally, this is going to be a real challenge for me. And part of it just emanates from the fact that Steve is so animated and into it. And I think in a positive way. No, I don't think he's going to, as he said, he's got a day job, and he probably needs that day job to pay for some of the, potential losses we have with the Mets. So from my standpoint, that's a good thing.
And also just how long do you want to do this? Coming on at age 72, is this an open-ended thing for you? Or is this something that you want to maybe steward over for a couple of years? Do you want to do it until you win? I mean, what's kind of your personal timeline with this?
Yeah, so I've committed to a couple of years, but it's open-ended. Thank you for referencing my age.
Apologies.
It is what it is. I don't want to die with my boots on, but I think this is going to be a great couple of years. We'll see where it goes. And that's all I can say.
Thank you.
Next up is Mike Puma.
Mike Puma from the New York Post. Sandy, just wanted to know, from what aisle of the supermarket would you say you're shopping in this offseason?
So this is the Scott Boras approach to interpreting Mets intentions in free agency, I guess. So here's how I would respond. I would say that, we're gonna make sure we got enough meat and potatoes, but we're gonna be shopping in the gourmet section as well.
How does it feel to be able to shop in the gourmet section after it's not always being permitted to go there in the past?
I don't know. I got to find out where it is.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Next question comes from Disha Thozar.
Hey, Sandy. Just you kind of already touched on this, but you said that your mindset and your ideas of how to run a successful baseball team haven't really changed. Now you have the freedom to implement them. How do you kind of respond to fans who might be cautious of your return to the organization? And just kind of how will your tenure as president be different this time?
Oh, well, I think to understand or have an expectation about the way that I'm going to approach this job, you got to go all the way back to the last century, unfortunately. There was a time when my team, the Oakland A's, had the largest payroll in baseball. In the early 80s, we started adopting analytics. We kept it quiet because we thought it might be a competitive advantage. The data didn't exist at that time the way it does now. So a lot of these concepts that have subsequently been, proven and kind of built out were just ideas at the time, but they were concepts you could actually follow. So in terms of how I'm going to, approach this, I wouldn't want people to just look at my tenure with the Mets and make assumptions. Even with the Mets, I think that, we were, I probably was characterized as patient. I don't know that equates with, sloth-like. Patience is a virtue, I think, but you got to know when to pull the trigger. Patience in and of itself is probably not a virtue. Timing is. So we did I think we took some risks, last time. We took some risks with various people. Some of them worked out, some of them didn't. Tried to do it at the right time. But in any event, I think that the environment will be a little bit different. And I think the fans' expectations are already very different. And there's no reason to think that the way I approach things won't be a little bit different as well.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay.
Tim Britton, your line is open.
Hi, Sandy. Tim Britton with The Athletic.
Yeah.
Kind of on similar lines there, you have the familiarity of being in this organization for 8 years as it is run one way, and now it appears it's going to be run a pretty different way. How does that familiarity with what it could be here maybe enhance your optimism or enthusiasm for what changes you can kind of make manifest this time around?
Good question. So I think my familiarity with the organization goes beyond the individuals. And so I don't know everybody in the organization at this point. It's been turnover, for a couple of years, but I do know a large number of people. More importantly, I think I know how they function. I know how they interact. I know where we're strong and to some extent, I think where we're weak. And this is not with respect just to individuals, it's with respect to categories of activity. So if you take player development, it's not just player development generally. It's about the coaching staffs, the performance group, the analytics integrated with that group. There are a variety of different things. And I think I have a little more granular knowledge of the Mets than most people would just coming in. In fact, I know I have a lot more. So I have some pretty strong ideas that are predicated on my experience, but also my observation of the way things are done elsewhere today. You wouldn't be talking to me today at age 72 if I wasn't curious myself and wasn't interested in understanding, where things have come, where they can go, and have an open and sort of progressive mindset. So it's not like I have ideas that I want to imprint. It's really about gleaning a lot of things that are currently, I think, working for other clubs and bringing them to the Mets. And so I hope my experience, not only in terms of years, but also, recently with the Mets and with the A's and so forth, And also my experience with the competition committee, the rules committee, that there's a contemporary approach to what we're trying to do. And that's what I hope we can achieve.
And then you joked about needing to find the gourmet aisle, but do you have to kind of, is there a mindset you need to get across to some people who have been with the Mets for a long time that they can maybe think bigger or think differently, at least, than they have in the past?
Yes, I think that's the case. For example, when Brad Hand was on waivers last week, 1 year, $10 million. If the timing had been a little bit different, we might have jumped on that. Now, is that a good deal? I don't know. It's probably overpaying a little bit. Who knows? But today, given what we want to achieve, it's not about how much less we can get somebody for. It's more about getting that somebody. Now, I don't want to create the impression that we're just going to go out and, sign a bunch of players. But I think we now can emphasize the acquisition rather than the cost. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you, Sandy. Next up is Ron Blum.
Ronnie.
Yes, Sandy. How did you first meet Steve? And what was that like?
I first met Steve in New York in December of last year at a breakfast arranged by Andy Cohen, his right-hand person at Cohen Private Ventures. Andy is really the guy that got me involved in this originally. Andy was the guy who represented Steve at minority owner meetings at Citi Field. Andy's the guy that I got to know somewhat through those meetings. And, that was my original connection to Steve. So, we met in December. It was in connection with the first iteration of this transaction. And then it went into, it was a casual conversation, but it went into hibernation for a long period of time. And Steve was able basically to thread the needle over the next several months. And so our relationship wasn't really cemented until, I would say recent months, but I first met him in December of last year.
Next question is from Eric Fisher.
Hey, Sandy, good afternoon. So question about the minor leagues, which we've obviously talked a lot. We're in the midst of some large scale changes across the affiliated system, and in particular, your way anticipating some changes with Brooklyn. But broadly, how do you see this whole shakeout playing out for the Mets?
Well, I think that, we're going to lose some minor league franchises, and on its face, I'm not really happy about that. I think that, the minor leagues provide more than just players. They provide a presence in a lot of small communities that are able to make a connection between Major League Baseball and the players that are there in front of them. Having said that, I think Major League Baseball is going to do a great job of expanding opportunities in those areas where teams are going to be eliminated. So overall, based on what I've heard as recently as yesterday, I really think, they've got a cogent plan in place. For us, we're going to be in Syracuse. We're going to be in Binghamton. We're going to be in St. Lucie, and we'll be in Brooklyn. And the nice thing about Brooklyn is that I think it's going to become a full season affiliate. So people can start watching baseball on Coney Island in April if they can stand the wind coming off the ocean. But I think it's a great opportunity for local baseball, and we're really excited about our continuing affiliation with all of those 4 teams. There'll be, other players in St. Lucie beyond the the team that's playing there. It's going to be a little different, but I think there's some positives associated with the changes. You know, one of the problems with developing players is they play too often. You know, they play every day, and you don't always develop just through performance. There's a lot of other time that could be well spent developing skills, and I think some of our players were able to take advantage of that this year. So, you know, there's some positives, there's some negatives, but I think, you know, we will end up with a very strong organization. As Steve pointed out, we're going to grow our own players. You know, I think that the Mets have drafted very well over the last 8 or 10 years, including, I think, the last 2 years. I really like the approach they took. So we're going to draft those players. I'm going to assume, based on our track record, that they're going to be pretty good, and we're going to hold on to them. You know, there are only two currencies in baseball: players and money. And if you're going to give up fewer players, you're going to have to expend more money. And I think what will happen with Steve is that we're going to have the opportunity to sort of husband our players in ways that maybe we weren't able to do before.
I guess any time for about two more. Bradford Davis, your line's open.
Hi, Sandy. Nice to meet you. Bradford Davis from the New York Daily News. Just going back to the question that, or rather, an answer you gave to Anthony earlier today. You said that Steve has often asked you very insightful questions. As you guys are building a relationship and building this team. I'm curious if were there any particularly insightful sort of conversations you had that impressed or even surprised you about him. Whether it is his strategies, leadership, etc.
Well, one of the things that's impressed me is just the dialogue that we've had. So, it hasn't just been about me answering questions. It's actually been a dialogue. And I've enjoyed them partly for their content, but partly for the fact that they, take place on sort of an even, balanced basis. These aren't challenging questions per se. They're learning questions, and not probing in the sense of accountability, but probing in the sense of education. And, I don't know that there's anything that stands out. One conversation might be with a particular player who, for some reason, was on the news. Another question might arise from a Twitter response that he may have gotten. So there's a breadth of questions and a variety of answers. He keeps me on my toes, and that's what I like. I like being challenged, and that's what's happened with Steve.
Good. Last question, Justin Toscano. We'll open up your line.
Hey, Sandy, welcome back. Obviously, the game is pretty rapidly changing as it relates to kind of organizational infrastructure, especially in front offices. In what ways do you think not only Steve's vision, but the resources he's able to provide will help you guys be kind of on the cutting edge of some of those changes?
Well, I think that first and foremost, the Mets have become a very attractive landing place. I think that's true across the board. Suddenly, overnight, I think people are interested in working for the Mets within the game who perhaps were not before. I think that players are interested in the Mets for reasons they might not have been before. So, from that standpoint, I think that we've really got an opportunity here to be selective, whether it's, in how we build out our operation, our front office on the baseball side, the business side, but also with respect to players and coaches. And I think that's a great place for us to be in, because ultimately the success of the organization is going to be predicated on the quality of the people who work for the Mets. And, one of my jobs is to make sure that we have that quality of individual, and at the same time, we have the the systems, the processes that leverage that ability in individuals. And that's kind of what I'm focused on, is finding good people, rewarding good people wherever they are within the organization, and providing a structure and process that leverages their abilities, and ultimately leads to some success, hopefully, for us.
Sandy, with that, I want to thank you very much for all your time this afternoon, and also want to especially thank everybody else who participated in this call. Moving forward, please reach out if there's any further assistance we can provide or any additional information. And with that, we look forward to seeing and speaking with everybody again soon. Everybody,
thanks,
stay
everybody.
safe.
Yeah, thanks for everybody. I enjoyed it. You wore me out, and I look forward to doing it again.
Thanks, Sandy.
All right, so that is the new president of the New York Mets, Sandy Alderson. We heard from the new owner and CEO, Steve Cohen, before that. About a 95-minute session between the new owner and the new president, who's back in the organization for the first time since 2018. So let's begin here, Andy, and there's so much to get to. Todd Zeile's going to join us in just a little bit, Steve Gelbs as well, and we'll hear more from Sandy Alderson, who will join Steve. But let's begin the unpacking with Steve Cohen, who came across as incredibly authentic, as a Mets fan who had been watching this team since his days as a young boy, going to the Polo Grounds, then Upper Deck at Shea Stadium. What was your overall feeling about what you heard from Steve?
Well, I think that Mets fans are going to like what they heard. The small sliver that's on social media already, just looking at it, responding very positively to what they're seeing. Other people are watching at home, not reacting publicly, but I would expect that from the things that you mentioned, Gary, the memories of the Polo Grounds, the fact that there's just body language, I think, even that would work for the New York audience. I think the New York audience knows how to spot authenticity. It's one of the reasons why I think Sandy Alderson and Omar Minaya, two people who are very different, were always particularly well-liked by the fan base, because both is comfortable in his own skin and both is authentically who he is. And Steve Cohen, with the subject matter that he was talking about, seemed obviously very confident person, very at ease, wasn't worried about presenting a series of bullet points or talking points, but just was able to speak from the cuff. Obviously, when you're successful in business, as Steve Cohen has been, that's going to imbue you with some personal confidence. I think we saw that on display. He didn't shy away from the fact that he's going to be a very demanding boss, a demanding owner, someone who demands accountability and has high expectations, but someone who said, honestly, it seems like a small thing, but the fact that he was willing to say, sort of explore his thoughts in public shows a certain confidence and authenticity on this topic that I think actually comes across well among a New York audience that can smell authenticity.
I think you're right about the fact that fans are going to love what they heard from Steve Cohen. He talked about doing it for the fans. I can make millions of people happy, as we welcome Todd Zeile into this conversation right now. Todd, what was your first and overall impression of what you heard from the new owner?
I think Andy hit on it well. I think one of the things that you can really sense about Steve Cohen is that level of authenticity. I think he's truly a fan. I think he is not looking at this as just an ego play like a lot of owners may do. I think he has expectations to win. I think he has very high expectations, as Sandy alluded to in the 3 to 5 year comment. But all of that being said, I thought the way he kind of related to what he does in his other line of work, developing young talent, and really showing accountability, I think is something that is what you want to hear from a guy that's coming to take over the reins. I've seen a lot of ownership press conferences that are a lot more full of fluff and cliche. I don't think I felt any of that from Steve Cohen at all. And I believe that he does have the best interests of not only this organization and himself in mind, but I really do believe that as a fan, as a longtime fan and a real loyal Mets fan, I think he does have the best interests of the fan base and the community in mind as well, which I think is something that's also going to resonate really well with Mets fans.
Well, Todd, he also said, I'm not in this to be mediocre. That's not my thing. And if I think if you're hearing that as a Mets fan, You've got to be fired up. You've got to be really excited. I think that's the tone we're getting. But from a player standpoint and from an organizational standpoint, I would think that's got to make you pretty happy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know that he wants to win. That's a key for a Mets fan. You know that he's got the resources to be able to make the moves that I think Mets fans have wanted to be able to make over the last decade or so. And I also recognize that he doesn't feel like he's going to be the guy making all the decisions. I think he is going to put people in place that he gives a lot of latitude, and he's going to delegate authority, but they're going to be held accountable. Their feet are going to be held to the fire. And I think that just creates, I think, an environment that people, as Sandy alluded to at the end, are going to want to be a part of, that maybe felt like there was some constraints in taking a position with the Mets in the past, either from a player's standpoint or from a front office or managerial standpoint. I think those constraints are going to be lifted, and I think this is going to be seen as sort of the mecca, the place to come, because it's a big market. It's a team that's got a core. It's an owner that wants to win. It's an owner that's a fan of the franchise and this community from experience like no other community in sports that I've been. I played in 11 organizations. I've never felt the type of passion and loyalty as I have when I was a Met, and even in my post-baseball career as a broadcaster, that Mets loyal fan base is out there, and they're starving, and I think they feel like they're being fed.
Well, I think you're right about that. And we heard Sandy Alderson say he's looking to build an iconic franchise here. And he said, you can't do that everywhere. And I think that speaks to your point, Todd. You're not necessarily going to do that in many other cities. You talked about Chicago and Los Angeles as places you can do that. And Andy Martino, when you talk about, the Dodgers, and that's a comp you made in the past, and the fact that that was brought up by Steve Cohen, the fact that he admires what they've done in Los Angeles. Expound more on that and what you take out of that.
Well, what the Dodgers do that's considered a model to the rest of the industry, and the Yankees are in this category too, is that not only do you have sustained contention on the field, but you have back-end infrastructure that enables that. The Red Sox are a different kind of model. They're an intelligent organization, but they can win a World Series and then be in last place and be all over the map. The Dodgers have figured out a way, as have the Yankees, to be in the postseason or in the postseason mix almost every season. You do that by pouring money into research and development, by having traditional scouts that you invest in, by having a really beefed up analytics department. The Dodgers at one point a few years ago emptied out the visitors clubhouse, which is a small clubhouse but is now a big R&D room, and that's where they put a lot of their analytics people, right on the field level. That old visitors clubhouse is full of people crunching numbers and providing information to the field staff and to the players. So it's work like that. It's stuff that the public doesn't see that enables the processes to, they hope, lead to winning. Now, I will say that the Guggenheim Group took over the Dodgers. They bought the Dodgers in 2012 and have had success almost all that time, won their first championship here now in 2020. So I thought that the 3 to 5 year window that Steve Cohen laid out, while that is certainly something the fans want to hear, an introductory press conference, was aggressive. Even by that East Coast Dodger model, that's a timetable, winning a championship in 3 to 5 years, that the Dodgers as the model organization were not able to achieve. The Yankees as a model organization here in the East have not won a World Series since 2009, but it's been a very successful run for them by industry standards. So that is really an aggressive timetable that Cohen laid down on that today, and ahead of those organizations that he considers, by his words, to be a model, Gary.
Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree, Andy. And one of the things that I think is interesting when you're talking about iconic franchises is the fact that you looked at the Yankees, obviously, in baseball as an iconic franchise. But during the 80s and early 90s, they could spend all day and still couldn't find winners. I think when they started developing their players from within and bolstered the front office, Brian Cashman has done a great job of using analytics as well as piecing the team together. I think that is the difference. It's not just about having the deeper pockets to spend money that's going to make you an iconic franchise. And I think it's something that not only Steve said, but Sandy alluded to, that they want to really start winning and building this iconic franchise from within. Increase your scouting, increase your reach internationally, do a little bit more on the analytical side to develop players that are going to be sustainable. Don't give up your farm system for the quick fix. Those things are sometimes going to take time. I think there's a good core, and Sandy alluded to that, as did Steve. But those are the kind of things that build iconic franchises, because iconic franchises are not teams that happen to be in a big market that overspend to win a championship and then struggle. I think iconic franchises find a way to be sustainable winners, even when the odds may be stacked against them, and it's not just about spending money.
Todd, stand by. Andy as well. I want to bring Steve Gelbs into this conversation right now. He joins us from down the way in Studio 42, Steve, with Sandy Alderson. Go ahead, Steve.
Gary, thank you very much. And Sandy, listen, I know that you just went through a marathon press conference. At the end, you said we wore you out, so I promise that I'll be brief here. But I do have a few more for you. And it's
I was
great to see
kidding.
you.
They're not that tough. Okay, you're not that tough. I was kidding.
All right, so I'll go for another. What do you think? Half hour, 45 minutes work for you?
Whatever.
Well, listen, Sandy.
Let's cover everything so that baseball tonight in New York, can take the night off.
Fantastic. I love that plug right there, too. So listen, we've certainly known each other for a number of years now. And, maybe aside from that champagne shower after Game 5 in L.A. in 2015, this was probably the most excited that I've seen you. Generally, I hate asking questions to rank how does this compare with other moments, but you've been in baseball a long time. Where would you describe your excitement level now and your anticipation level about what could be versus other really exciting moments in your career?
It's interesting, Steve, because excitement comes in unusual places. I've been in the game for I don't know how many years, and we've won the World Series once. That was back in 1989. Everybody else in the game goes home unhappy at the end of the season. Todd Zeile knows that very well. And so as a consequence, you got to find your excitement in different places. And today's one of those days for me, just because of the possibilities that are out there for the Mets and how that translates for Mets fans. I mentioned Wilmer Flores being one of my great memories. That was exciting. The whole 15 season toward the end was exciting. But look, Steve's laid out a pretty aggressive schedule for us. We need to win a championship in the next 3 to 5 years. So I'm excited about the effort that we're all going to make to try to achieve that. And, Steve is going to provide the resources. I think he's going to provide the leadership just in terms of his enthusiasm and his commitment to help make that happen. So I'm really excited about that.
You mentioned the resources, and certainly that is the number one thing that's gotten the headlines and the publicity, the amount of resources that Steve Cohen is bringing to the table here. And I know that Mets fans think immediately about big-ticket free agents and a payroll that's at the top of Major League Baseball. And while it certainly sounds like you guys won't shy away from those types of moves, I think the trend in Major League Baseball is to really invest in everything else as well behind the scenes, the analytics, the health and performance. When you look at your perfect vision for a sustainably great franchise, how much would you allocate the importance towards payroll and how much towards building up and beefing up all these other things in an organization?
Well, look, I think that franchises that are sustainably successful maybe boils down to two things. One is resources. I mean, you got to have the ability to compete for talent and in an ability to build out your organization generally, which gets me to the second point, which is good decision making. And good decision making is, not it's not a game of chance. If you can build, if you hire quality people and you build decision-making processes that make sense and allow you to be methodical, not in your timing and not in, the way bureaucratic in the way you approach things, but methodical, rational. When I was in the Marine Corps, I can remember the first checklist I got. By the way, today's the 245th birthday of the Marine Corps. All Marines like to tout their existence on this particular day. But I can still remember, SMEAC, situation, mission, execution, administration, communication. These are the kinds of processes, if you will, we need to create. So we're all checking off everything consistently. So consistent decision-making and resources, I think, are really the key. And I think that, Steve will bring the resources. And then what we have to do is create an environment, a capacity, build out our farm system, build out the business side, make sure we're doing all the things we want to do on social media, running the gamut of an operation, but create the capacity and then a foundation of good decision-making across the board, baseball, business, what have you. That's the way we're going to be sustainably successful over time.
Sandy, that's a big job ahead to build that type of infrastructure. So in your mind, just how difficult is that, and how long does something like that take until it really is up and running in full?
Well, I don't think it's going to take us that long. Let me give you an example of something that currently I think is running very well within the Mets organization. So when I was with the Mets last in 2018, we decided to build out, I don't know what we called at the time, a performance group. This included trainers, sports scientists, strength and conditioning coaches, doctors, but basically a group of integrated disciplines that would allow us to better care for and strengthen and rehabilitate our players. Steve mentioned about keeping our players healthy. I really think the Mets have done a good job since 2018 building that out. And so, and I think that to some extent that's been reflected in the availability of players and a sort of a lesser rate of injury. So that's an area where job, and it didn't take that long to build it out. There's some things that continue to need to do to kind of build that through the minor league system as well, and make sure it's integrated well with the other aspects of our baseball operation. But it doesn't have to take that long. But it's going to require good people, and sometimes one person can make a big difference. It doesn't take a whole cadre of people. Sometimes great things are accomplished just through one person, strength of will, curiosity, and then having the requisite sort of resources to make it happen.
Sandy, the first thing you said today was that you have spoken with Luis Rojas, and you said that he should prepare himself to likely be the manager next year in 2021. Not 100%, yeah. but likely. Why was it important for you to speak with Luis and give him this update? And just, I know you weren't here last year, but watching from afar and speaking with people that were holdovers from your regime as well that were here last year, what do you feel Luis was able to do and how he was able to navigate a very, very unique situation a season ago?
Well, let me back up a little bit and give you kind of a general answer to the question about managers. I really believe that managerial leadership in the game, and this would be true of a lot of leadership positions, it's a function of professional competence and, on the other hand, personal qualities. And I really think that, to have a long-running success as a manager, it's as much about the personal qualities as it is about the competency. Look, you got to be able to make, the decisions during the game. And your credibility as a leader is partly going to be a function of that. But in order to do it for a period of time, you really have to be a quality person in order for people to identify with you, to respect you, to accept your decisions, good or bad, and move on. And so I think Louis has the personal side nailed down. He's a great person. I've known him for a long time. He has those qualities that engender respect and loyalty and commitment. Sometimes you win or lose not based on individual performance. It's the commitment that players have to their teammates and to their leadership. I think Louis got all that. He would probably admit that he's got a lot to learn as a manager of a major league team between the lines. But honestly, that's the easy part. And we need to make sure that he has people around him who can help him do that. So the only reason I didn't shut the door on all this speculation is because we are going to hire somebody on the baseball side, and they need to have some input into this decision. But it's very difficult for somebody in his position to just be hanging out there for days and days and days. This is one of the reasons that last Friday we made some of those decisions, which seemed precipitous to some, but I think needed to be made. I think that people were anxious, and so you really have to understand that human element too, and respect it, and try to be as forthcoming as possible as soon as possible.
Sandy, I'm going to finish with this one. I think one of the big storylines in Major League Baseball over the last number of years has been the fact that, Mike Trout is a generational type talent, and the Angels have been unable to put the team around him to take advantage of that. You have right now in Jacob deGrom a generational type talent, the best pitcher in baseball, pitching right now in his prime. Is there an added feeling of responsibility in this moment because of that fact to make sure that you guys don't waste another, couple of years with this asset? You take advantage while you have him in this moment?
I think the answer is, yes and no. Obviously, Jacob is an incredible pitcher, athlete, and we've benefited from him over the last few years, and not in terms of team success, but his individual performance. And and to a large degree, there is a desire, sort of an urgency to take advantage of those years. But that's true of some other players too. We've got Michael Conforto, who to me is sort of a prototypical Mets player, which I've really thought since the time he came up in 2015. We've got some other players who are in the midst of careers and under the system. We don't have them for that long, and so there's an urgency, very definitely, and it relates to Jacob deGrom, but it relates to some of the other players we have as well. There's an expiration date on our ability to keep these players currently, and we want to make sure that yes, we're able to retain them longer term, but recognize that anything can happen and take advantage of their abilities and talent right now.
Sandy, so great to see you once again. So great to talk to you once again. First of many in the near future. So thanks so much again for the time, and I look forward to chatting again soon.
All right, Steve, take care.
All right,
you look good in a tie, by the way.
Say that again?
You look good in a tie.
Hey, only the best for you on this day.
Yeah,
Don't expect much moving forward. That is Sandy Alderson. We now send it back to Gary.
All right, Steve and Sandy, we thank you both. And Gelbs, yes, he does look very handsome, very debonair in a tie. Andy Martino, as we bring it back, we've spoken quite a bit about Steve Cohen, and rightly so. But what about biggest takeaways that you heard from Sandy Alderson today?
That he's happy and that he's excited. This is somebody who's been on the scene a long time. Sandy Alderson's always had an intellectual curiosity. He's enjoyed talking to people throughout the organization, at different levels of the organization. We heard him allude to that earlier when he talked about being with the Oakland A's the last couple of years, talking to the coaches, talking to different people. And he is someone who enjoys digging into a big project like this. And you can see through his words, through his demeanor, through his body language, that he's very happy about the task ahead. He wouldn't have taken this job, Gary, if he wasn't going to have the autonomy to run the team, both baseball and business, that Steve Cohen has offered him. And he wouldn't be taking the job at age 72 with a successful resume if it wasn't a challenge, I think, that he welcomed personally. So we saw that exude off of him. There are different Sandy Aldersons that you see depending on what's going on with the team. Sometimes he can be frustrated. Sometimes he can be curt. Sometimes he can be wisecracking. And I think what we saw today throughout Steve's interview and then the long news conference beforehand was just Sandy Alderson, who was very much at ease with who he is in this current setup and excited about the task ahead.
Well, I think he talked about the fact that he's not going to make all the final decisions. He said he will be a guy at the table, but not necessarily when it comes to baseball decisions. At the head of the table, there is going to be a president of baseball operations that is going to be under Sandy Alderson. And Steve Gelbs, I'm anxious to get your take on the owner, the new owner, Steve Cohen. And, you're at that ballpark every day during the course of the season. What your general take was on what you heard from Steve?
Gary, I thought that opening press conference was pitch perfect. And if you're a Mets fan, you have to be giddy with what he said. There were three quotes that really stood out to me. The first one being, "I'm essentially doing it for the fans. When I really thought about it, I can make millions of people happy." And that, there was something about that just really hit me because, for many people, I think that the idea of owning their favorite team is like the biggest pie in the sky wish imaginable. And they think about it from their own perspective. And, for Steve Cohen to talk about it being this realization that he had the ability to make millions of people giddy in the way that he knows he would be as a Mets fan if this Mets team, was just sustainably great year in, year out. I thought that was a really interesting way to put it. He said, "I'm not in this to be mediocre. That's just not my thing. I want something great." And he also said, I'm trying to build a sustainable franchise. I don't want to be good 1 year and bad 3 years. I want to be good every year." And I just think that things like that are important to hear because someone with the level of resources that Steve Cohen clearly has could be inclined to just throw money at as many big-name free agents as possible. And as exciting as that would be up front for the Mets fan base, you've seen that is not necessarily a way to build a sustainable winning team. And I think he understands that. I think it was important to hear that. And, I don't doubt that the Mets will be right at the top there of any big free agent if he feels a need for this team. But that's not what it's going to be all about. And I think that is a critical thing moving forward for this franchise.
And I thought it was interesting, Steve, to hear Steve Cohen say that he's got a lot to learn when it comes to baseball and running a major league organization. And, Sandy alluded to the fact that they speak 2 to 3 times a day when the market goes a little bit quiet around noontime. They have these conversations. Andy Martino, what about the fact that the general manager, former general manager, now the president of the organization, Sandy Alderson, said that it's very likely that Luis Rojas is going to come back and be the manager in 2021. Were you at all surprised by that?
I was somewhat pleasantly surprised, Gary. Alderson and the group that remains with the Mets has kept that pretty well under wraps what their plans were for Luis Rojas. It was an indication on Friday when Rojas was frankly not let go like so many others in the prior Mets front office, that he stood a good chance of returning, at least at some capacity in the organization. But you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. And in that odd analogy, which I have wondered where it comes from, Luis Rojas is the baby. You don't want to just toss out everything and then get rid of somebody who's done a very nice job, shows a lot of potential. Certainly, as Sandy said, by his own admission, Rojas has room to grow, but there's no reason to let somebody go who is promising in that job when you think he can grow into that job. And clearly Alderson, knowing Rojas, and as he spoke to with Steve just now as a person, believes that he has the skills to grow into what he thinks is the easy part of the job, which is between the lines. And I think that was insightful from Alderson. Having leadership qualities that you're born with, those are more important to managing than having an understanding of all the ins and outs and the X's and O's that you can learn from a seasoned and experienced coaching staff and front office. Yeah, I agree with everything Andy said right there. You know, one of the things that Steve Cohen pointed to quite often in his press conference was that his day job, .72, they are sustainably great because they invest in young talent. And Luis Rojas is a young talent. Is he perfect at this point? No, but he is someone that has been long thought, not just in the Mets organization, but in Major League Baseball, as a future manager and a future really good manager. And I think that while the results on the field weren't there last year, there was so much that he had to deal with that many first-time managers do not have to deal with, not anything close. And to get through that and to still have the respect of the room, which he definitely did. He is someone who really was and is beloved by his players. I think it is the right choice, if it is ultimately the one the Mets do decide to make, to keep him on board and give him another run at this thing, especially if this season becomes one that looks a little more similar to the norm. We're all crossing our fingers, but I think Luis Rojas has the potential to be a good manager, the potential to be a great manager, and I think you ride with that at least for another year. Well, I think it would be a huge upset at this point if he is not back as the manager in 2021. Reading between the lines from Sandy Alderson, he's going to give that new president of baseball operations some leeway here to make decisions, but it certainly does sound like Luis Rojas is going to be back as the manager of the New York Mets. And Todd, as I bring you back in here, how important do you think it is, with a new ownership group and a new owner and a new president coming in, how important do you think it is to have some consistency and somebody who was in that dugout in the past and has such a great relationship and such respect from so many of his players to be back again?
I think it's important. I think that what Sandy had to say was sort of exactly what I would have expected him to say, because I think we watched Luis Rojas navigate landmines after landmine last year in a season that you can't describe as anything but unprecedented. And I think what Sandy was talking about with Steve is that, the primary thing that he looks for in a manager is those personal attributes that we all, I think, recognize that Luis Rojas has. His ability to be level-headed, his ability to communicate with players, his ability to know the game, but also be honest enough that he can say to the press, hey, I messed up, I have accountability, or this guy could have done something better. I think those are all tough things to learn to do, and it was obvious to us, especially given all the adversity that they faced last season, that Luis Rojas was very capable of those things, and those are the personal traits that I think Sandy values so much. So I would say it's very likely he's going to be back unless he brings somebody in that just really wants his own guy. I think that's why he's leaving that little bit of doubt. But I think, I would say it's very, very likely that we're going to see Luis Rojas at least for another season.
Andy, Martino, what do you make of the timeline that both Sandy Alderson and Steve Cohen discussed, talking about trying to win a championship within the next 3 to 5 years? And you pointed to the fact that, as much as the Dodgers have had an enormous amount of money and an ownership group with great resources, it took 7 or 8 years They had success, yes, but to win a championship took 7 or 8 years. What do you make of the 3 to 5 year timeline that was discussed?
That's very aggressive, and I think that was the one touch of George Steinbrenner that we saw in this news conference, in that most baseball organizations from ownership on down will tend to define success as perennial contention. Look at how the Tampa Bay Rays, or another example, we've talked about the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Rays, they're looked at as models of baseball organizations, not in any way because of championships, but because of perennial contention, because of process, because of intelligent people who run them, and the fact that, frankly, economically, it makes a lot of sense to be still selling tickets, having TV and radio ratings, all these things in September and perhaps into October every year. So contention is often the goal in this business, unless you're, say, a George owner in the mold of a George Steinbrenner that says, I got in this to win, I want to win. That was the moment where Cohen did that. The rest of his portion of the news conference was pretty low-key, even-keeled and process-oriented, but that was the part to your question, Gary, where I thought, whoa, 3 to 5 years. I wonder if Sandy knew that ahead of time, or if that's something that just kind of came out, and everybody better get going, because that is a really aggressive window to win a championship.
So listen, Andy, it's super aggressive, but I also don't think it's something that currently is crazy unrealistic either, and for 2 reasons. You know, first of all, you heard me talk to Sandy Alderson and ask him the question about Jacob deGrom. This is having Tom Seaver in his prime. It is. I mean, this is having a generational type, top of the rotation pitcher, and you need to push all your chips to the center of the table when you have that type of talent. So, you know, first and foremost, to have that building block and to have some of the others that Sandy spoke about, Michael Conforto, certainly what we saw this year with Dom Smith, what we've seen in the past with Pete Alonso. I mean, they have some real special building blocks that if they can you know, beef things up around the margins, this could very quickly become a title contender. So that's the first thing. The second thing, though, is the unique place that the Mets have in the market this offseason. And we've talked a lot about this. Given what the league experienced last year, you essentially have 29 owners who lost money, who are cutting costs. You're going to see a lot of good players that are in the market, that were waived, that their options weren't picked up, that you normally wouldn't see. And the Mets are the one team that look to have an owner that is going to want to spend more this offseason. And so I think that they can get pretty good pretty fast. And I wouldn't put it past this organization, given what we heard today, to be right there in title contention within the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, anytime the president of your organization says we're going to be shopping in the gourmet section, that's got to make Met fans very happy out there. And Todd, as I go back to you on this, and we go back to the fact that Sandy said he believes this can be an iconic organization and a destination place, which he believes it already is for players. What's your take on that? And do you believe there is this feeling out there amongst players that I now want to come play for the New York Mets?
Yeah, I thought it was funny that Sandy said he's going to have to, find the gourmet section first before he starts shopping in it. But having said that, I think what he was alluding to is the fact that you've got an ownership change that is less than, monumental, but more than insignificant. I think this ownership change is going to say to players that they want to win, that there is a matter of resources out there that you want to. I mean, if you want to play in New York City, if you think you can handle New York City, there's no better place to win, and there's no better place to, to play sports in all of the universe. And as we know, I've tried about every other market. So I think that's first and foremost. And there was a lot of players that wouldn't come to the Mets side of town because they weren't sure if they were going to go to New York and be under the spotlight and have the scrutiny that comes with playing in New York City. Were they going to have a chance to win? And I think that's waned over the last couple of decades. But now all of a sudden that's been that new light has been lit under this franchise. And I think there's going to be a lot of players that say, hey, this is the best place to be. This is the new best place to be. And I think by the same token, what you heard Sandy allude to is it doesn't just mean players. I think there's front office guys, there's managers that want to take a chance at being a winner in New York City. And now I think Steve Cohen has sort of infused that possibility into all of baseball. And I think you're going to see the results of that coming up very soon.
Well, certainly a monumental day in the history of the New York Mets. We want to thank you, Todd, and you, Steve, and you, Andy. You'll all be back for Baseball Night in New York coming up at 6 o'clock tonight, a special hour-long edition of that show. Do want to hit a couple of things on the way out the door here. So the new owner said owning a team is a civic responsibility. He is a lifelong Mets fan and feels that he is such a part of this fan base. And for Met fans everywhere out there, this got to be a very exciting day. And he also, and I'll leave you on this, he said, I am all in. Let's go Mets. For Andy Martino, for Steve Gelbs, for Todd Zeile, we thank you for joining us. Gary Apple, inside Studio 41 here in New York City. Our special coverage here on SNY. So long.